Hello, everybody. Sorry for the delay in getting this up and running. Now, I've been trying to figure out how I can share the screen on this, and I have not been able to figure this out. So sorry to say, I'm just going to be able to read it without showing the screen. You're just going to have to look at me. So without further ado, let's get right into it. If you have any questions, you have any comments, leave them in the chat, and I will get right to them. Okay, we left off on page 138 last time. I think it's chapter 6. Mental cooperation in takeover plans. I examined their projects to see what they were doing. This regional government program distributes federal funds for two major purposes. Number one, radio hookups between every police agency in the state to Fort Sam Houston. And number two, mental health programs, including programs for the mentally ill, having priority of beds in hospitals. Another interesting fact to consider is that in the Pine Bluff, Arkansas arsenal, B-Z is stored. It is a nerve gas which creates sleepiness, dizziness, stupor, and the incapacity to move about. According to the Associated Press, the agent can be sprayed by aerosol, injected, or sprayed over large areas by a bomb. The military has admitted that one potential use of the gas is for civilian control. So whatever they have planned, they've also planned a way for you to go to your destination in a tranquil state of mind. HEW, by law, is operated in conjunction with the United Nations through the World Health Organization. Back in 1948, the International Congress on Mental Health, a UN organization, declared in its pamphlet, Mental Health and World Citizenship, that prejudice, hostility, or excessive nationalism may become deeply embedded in the developing personality without awareness on the part of the individual concerned. In order to be effective, efforts of changing individuals must be appropriate to the successive stages of the unfolding personality. While in case of a group of society, changes will be strongly resisted unless an attitude of acceptance has first been engendered. Principles of mental health cannot be successfully furthered in any society unless there is progressive acceptance of the concept of world citizenship. The document states, programs for social change to be effective require a joint effort of psychiatrists and social scientists working together in cooperation with statesmen, administrators, and others in positions of responsibility. The three phases of the development are, number one, mental hospitals for segregation, care, and protection of persons of unsound minds. Number two, community health care centers so that persons may be treated in their own neighborhoods. And number three, child care centers for dealing with early difficulties of nationalism in a child's life. 2 years earlier, Major General G.B. Chisholm, Deputy Minister of Health in Canada, who later became Director of United Nations World Health Organization, explained, self-defense may involve a neurotic reaction when it means defending one's own excessive material wealth from others who are in great need. This attitude leads to war. So his solution to the problem is, let's redistribute the wealth among everyone. Further, the reinterpretation and eventual eradication of the individual's concept of right and wrong, which has been the basis of child training, are the belated objectives of practically all effective psychotherapies. Now, if we digress even further to Beria, the director of the Soviet secret police in the 1930s, we see that he explained the communist political strategy through the use of mental healings of psychiatry. Psychopolitics is the art and science of asserting and of maintaining a dominion over the thoughts and loyalties of individuals, officers, bureaus, and masses, and the effecting of the conquest of enemy nations through mental healing. You must work, he stated, until every teacher of psychology unknowingly or knowingly teaches only communistic doctrine under the guise of psychology. If you look at the Russian Manual of Instruction of Psychopolitical Warfare, we see in Chapter 9, psychopolitical operations should at all times be alert to the opportunities to organize for the betterment of the community mental health centers. Now, under the new National Mental Health Program, at the moment, there are more than 600 of these community health centers across the United States. The whole thing was promoted by Dr. Stanley Yoles, who was the director of the National Institute of Mental Health in 1969. And he stated back then that the newest trend treating mental illness is care at local health care centers, where the patient is not isolated from his or her family and friends. They have been working on this program for 46 years publicly and now across the U.S. Through your tax dollars, you have 603 centers, to be exact, community health centers that are all part of this program. Hello, everybody. If you have any, I will periodically check the comments as I read this. So I have not used this live stream in several years, and it's changed a little bit. It's a little bit more restrictive than it used to be. There used to be a way to hook it up with Google Hangouts, and I don't see that anymore. So, okay, I will go back into the book here. And this is how they are part of the program. It has already happened. In the mid-1950s, there was set into motion an interesting chain of events. About 1956, the Alaska Mental Health Bill was proposed and later passed. It granted approximately $12 million and 1 million acres of public land to Alaska so that it could develop its own mental health program. Now, this was a little abnormal since Alaska only had a little over 400 people who were classified as mentally ill. After the bill was passed, Alaska passed its own, enabling legislation to get into the mental health business. They started by adopting the essential elements of the Public Health Service Draft Act on the hospitalization of the mentally ill in the old Interstate Compact on Mental Health, now called the Uniform Mental Health Act. There were no provisions for jury trial in it or anything else. You would just be picked up and taken to the Alaskan Siberian Asylum incommunicado, and the state would also confiscate all your personal and real property. And they actually tried to do it as 1954 in the case of Ford versus Milenak, which declared the act as adopted in another state, the state of Missouri, as unconstitutional. But the act itself still exists and modified, but essentially in the same form, the Uniform Mental Health Act, to which approximately 6 states subscribe. And in passing month state constitutions, if you will check them from the period of 1935, made a part of their constitution the practice of having a person submit to a 90-day mental examination to determine his or her sanity without any provisions for a trial by jury. This was part of the national program at the time. In this act, the governor could have picked up and sent to the mental health institution in Alaska or elsewhere. The results, as rumors back in the 1950s, were that there was in fact a sinister Frankenstein-type mental health prison in Alaska. I wrote to Alaska, the officials that is, and asked them for a description of the land of 1 million acres that they were eligible to receive under the Alaska Mental Health Care Act. And I also asked them for a copy of the inventory they ran for their facilities back at the same time. Well, so far, no answer. And probably I will never receive an answer without a court order. I see some folks asking about Jim Willie. I sent Jim a message recently to see how he's doing. I haven't heard back from him. And I'm not sure when we're going to chat next. Unfortunately, when I travel, I only have this Chromebook with me that I'm using right now, and it's very limited in what it does. Yeah, I'm doing great. Weather down here is hot and humid. It was about 90 degrees today with about 90% humidity. And it didn't rain, so it was quite humid most of the day. Okay, back to the next section here. But through the years, there was a spot in Alaska that was continually referred to, southeast of Fairbanks, southwest of Fairbanks, northwest of Fairbanks, somewhere near Fairbanks. Then I received information that a pilot had flown over the area once and had his license revoked. And so for $1.85 each, I ordered the low-level navigation maps from the federal government for Alaska and located the Alaska Siberian Asylum for the treatment of enemies of the United States. It's right where rumor over the past 20 years had placed it, southeast of Fairbanks. It stands out like a sore thumb. It's the only one of that geometric configuration within the state of Alaska, and you will note a black line running up through Fairbanks and down over near that area of the map. That is the railroad that the Department of Transportation would take the emergency operation of under the executive order, if the executive order went into effect. And HEW would be responsible for making a determination of whether or not you are mentally disturbed because of your nationalistic tendencies, your love for the United States, or your adherence to any political or religious doctrine. But let's look a little further into the type of program that the LEAA is paying for through the Department of Justice. The Federal Bureau of Prisons, located in the backwoods of North Carolina, near a tiny village called Butner, is constructing a mammoth 42-acre research complex for prisoners from throughout the East, who will be sent for experiments to test new behavioral programs and techniques. Target date for completion of the entire system is ironically 1984. Be interesting to see what that location is doing today. And so they're using right now under the LEAA program something called anectine. Punishment for troublesome behavior within the prison is being done by drugs and shock, likely to be the most selected examples of programs that have made use of anectine, a derivative of South American curare. Anectine was originally used as a beginning factor to electroconvulsive shock. Such shocks applied to the head are so strong that they can break and graze bones under the strain of resulting muscle contractions. Since anectine paralyzed the muscles without dampening consciousness or the ability to feel pain, by first injecting the inmates with it, researchers can turn up the voltage as high as they want without cracking the inmate's skeleton when his body is thrown into convulsions by the jolt. What the anectine does, in short, is to simulate death within 30 to 40 seconds of injection. It brings on paralysis first with the small, rapidly moving muscles in the nose, fingers, and eyes, and then in the diaphragm and the cardiovascular system. As a result, the patient cannot move or breathe and yet remains fully conscious, as though drowning and dying. This from the 1974 publication, Human Behavior. Lovely. Okay. If anybody has any questions, just put them in. I'll periodically come back to the chat. If you have any questions about what I'm reading or Mexico or anything else, and I'll interject. The people versus the conspirators. The federal government answered my suit in June 1976 by filing an unsworn general denial of everything that I had alleged. I spoke with the assistant U.S. attorney in charge of the case and asked him if he had gone to the trouble to call any of the parties mentioned in the suits, since I had provided not only the addresses, but their telephone numbers to provide a faster means of investigation. He said he had not. He had not even done a minimal amount of investigation of the case, but yet he filed a denial of my allegations. I filed a motion in the meantime to take the deposition of the person who writes the training programs for the concentration camp guards, Mr. Richard Barrage, the 70th Maneuver Air Command at Army Reserve Center at Houston, Texas, stating in light of all the recent activity of government agents, one of the agencies involved might attempt to murder this key witness, the author of the training camp program. The federal judge denied my motion, stating that I had not quoted enough cases to him justifying my request. However, he was also aware that there were no cases existing on the set of facts, but as you will see as I go along with this report, he chose to ignore it. I then made an agreement with the assistant U.S. attorney to take the deposition of Mr. Barrage. After I'd made the arrangements, the U.S. attorney refused to voluntarily go along with taking the deposition. It is very difficult to find justice in our system of courts. Law is usually practiced by the buddy system. Hence, the court rules are overlooked or not followed. So it'll be interesting to see if Trump actually gets anything into the courts, or if this is just going to be smoke and mirrors. Mask free. Blah, blah, blah. The chains down here require you to wear a mask. So if you go into some of these supermarkets, they'll require you to mask. There's what's called OXXO, which is like their version of 7-Eleven. It's hit or miss. I never wear a mask when I go in them. And I'd say 1 out of 3 times I'm told to put my mask on. And if I'm told to put it on, then I either leave or I comply. I'm not going to make a scene down here. You know, I'm a guest in their country. So if I'm up in New Hampshire, then I'll go to a store that doesn't require a mask. And I do the same thing down here if required. A lot of the Mexicans wear masks. They just wear them. And I don't want to speak too derogatory but you know, the people down here, you know, they fall in line like they do in the United States. The United States controls this country in many ways. So I jokingly said, welcome to the land of the free. That's a whole another topic for another day. It's a little difficult to explain in 2 minutes. So, okay. On July 29th, a hearing was held at the Magistrate of Norman Black, U.S. District Court in Houston. The courtroom was completely filled with spectators, and although the news media had been contacted, no representatives of the press were there. There was a news media blackout on this matter here in Houston. Brief oral arguments were presented. The U.S. attorney explained that I was not the proper person to bring the suit because although the free exercise of my constitutional rights was threatened by the concentration camp program, as alleged, it did not constitute my injury. The magistrate was impressed with the information I had thus far collected and stated that he would bring it to the attention of the federal judge. The U.S. attorney tried to have my investigation of the case halted, but the magistrate would not go along that far with a prearranged decision. As an additional indication of what I was up against, the original hearing was scheduled for 10:30 in the morning. However, the U.S. attorney secretly had the time changed to 2:30 in the afternoon. The magistrate gave the U.S. attorney permission to file for motion to dismiss because he felt the concentration camp program to be used for persons who exercised the freedom of speech did not present any injury. Now, on July 23rd, I had placed in the Houston Post and in the Houston Chronicle newspapers the following advertisement in the legal section. Solicitation for witnesses in Civil Action 78-H-667, Federal District Court of Houston, People ex rel. William Pabst versus Gerald Ford et al. The action titled Complaint Against the Concentration Camp Program of the Department of Defense. Attention, if you have participated in Operation Garden Plot, Operation Cable Splicer, the 300th Military Police Prisoner of War Command, or the Army Reserve Civil Affairs Group, you may be involved in a program that needs to be disclosed for that suit. To give your testimony, call or write, and here I place my name, address, and telephone number. As I previously mentioned, there is a news media blackout on the story here in Houston. Both newspapers refused to carry the ad. First, at the Houston Post, I had to threaten them with a lawsuit to carry out the ad, even though I was paying for it. And then at the Houston Chronicle, I had to meet with the president and various vice presidents because a refusal from that paper had come up from their own lawyers. Both newspapers finally carried it, but only after 2 days of complaining. The initial response of both papers was, "We don't carry stories like that, and don't you think that the people planning the concentration camps have our best interests in mind? And you will hear for yourselves. The policies definitely do not reflect our best interests." The next event that occurred was the U.S. attorney filed a statement of authority showing the reasons that he couldn't find why I should not be allowed to take depositions to get more information from the person who was writing the concentration camp guard training program. However, his brief was completely filled with misquotes of the law from many cases. He would mention the case and then invent whatever case should say. In my brief to the court at this point, I notified the judge of the violation of the law requiring honesty in such matters, but the notification was ignored by the judge, who apparently sanctioned this most dishonest of acts, commonly known as quoting out of context. Okay, I think I'm going to halt that part there. That was the section that I wanted to get done. So before we leave, today is November 15th, Sunday. It is approximately going on 2 weeks after the election, and still no word as far as what's happening with Trump in the election that I've heard. I know Willie was talking about Rudy Giuliani getting involved, and he's very hopeful that this will lead to something. And I have no way of knowing if that's true or not, but I tend to think that the courts are probably not going to back the president at this point. I hope I'm wrong. But can you imagine the shitstorm that will come down if the courts reverse the preliminary election findings and rule that Trump actually will serve for a second term, or that votes have been discounted and then it comes down to the Electoral College? And it might come down to the various state houses and Congress itself. So with the way 2020 has gone, it's been such a crazy year. I don't see why this isn't going to get crazier. It almost would be too simple if Biden was ruled to be the winner and Trump conceded. That would be incongruent with the way that this year has gone. So expect fireworks. The positive thing is the building that I am in New Hampshire, I have a group next door to me who are all former Marines, and they are armed to the teeth. And they're Trump supporters, surprise, surprise. And that's what I've noticed. I've noticed that the right, the more conservative members of our society tend to be military trained, well armed, disciplined, and when they decide to take action, they take action. Whereas these BLM guys, these Antifa wimps who go out on the street and beat up old people, they have no idea the carnage that these weapons operated by well-trained individuals can cause. Just a squad of well-trained militia can take out probably a couple hundred of those BLM guys. They'll show up with the bats and their bottles or whatever they show up with, and they won't last 5 minutes. Won't last 5 minutes. This will be a very short fight. So if it goes to that end, and that's if you're in a city, that's probably what's on tap if Trump gets back in. So you just have to keep that in mind. I wouldn't rely on the police. The other thing is I've heard some people talking that Trump's a dictator. And Trish, how you doing? I hope you're feeling well. Hope you're doing well. Imagine if Trump actually made a clarion call for either the military or his supporters to support his position. That would be very, very interesting. Very, very interesting. And again, 2020 has been such a crazy year. I think that anything is possible. So does anybody have anything they'd like to ask or add in the conversation? Excellent. Good to hear. Good to hear. Well, I'll tell you what we can do, folks, is I know this is a little unorthodox, but does anybody have a prayer recommendation for President Trump? Normally I go to the Serenity Prayer. So unless somebody has a recommendation, I'll do the Serenity Prayer followed by the Lord's Prayer, which are not very long. So if I start with the Serenity Prayer, God, please grant me the serenity to accept the things I cannot change, the courage to change the things I can, and the wisdom to know the difference. And if you guys want to join me in the Lord's Prayer, the Our Father, who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done on earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread, as we forgive those who trespass against us. And lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. Amen. Dear Lord, please give our country the strength and the guidance to make good decisions. Please allow President Trump the courage and the strength to continue. And if it is determined that more people in this country have decided that President Trump should go, if this is a legitimate election, then that is the way it should be. God's will be done. But what I'm afraid of is that our country has lost its way, and I talked about this in the video with Jim Willie, is if he's pulled his protection from us, then we truly are on our own, and the proverbial barbarians at the gate. So no guarantee 2021 is going to be any better. But I hope everybody's having a great night. And thank you for joining me. And I'm sorry I didn't read more. I got delayed trying to figure out how to get the screen on, and I couldn't get it going. So unfortunately, I couldn't add that. So, well, everybody have a great night. Peace.